You know how some speakers just fascinate you while others speak in a way that you just get it immediately. It makes so much sense when they speak, and you're sitting there thinking, how did he do this? What's the trick? You know there's a trick, but you can't quite put your finger on it. The reason you can't put your finger on it is because it's not one thing. It's a multitude of things. And we'll go over, I'll try to limit myself to just 10 today, but we'll use our very own beloved in the entrepreneur world, Patrick Bet David, to show you, teach you the examples of all these tricks and tools you can start using to speak with more clarity, confidence, and power anywhere you need to speak for the rest of your life.
Patrick Bet David,
founder and CEO of PHP, one of the top insurance firms in America.
Entrepreneur, author,
and the creator of Valuetainment on YouTube.
But just before we get started, to make sure you don't confuse the order of things, we'll be speaking a lot about words today. But remember that words come out of you, you don't come out of words. So when we talk about PBD, I just pressed pause on the video. Just take a look at this. This is what the words come out of. I mean, look at this guy. Good Lord. 6'4", ex-military, jiu-jitsu, the eye of the tiger, on a mission, a man with a plan. This is what the words come out of. I can hear you complaining. It's not fair. Okay, I get it. Okay. You don't have to be a 6'4", 250-some pound stud to have these concept works for you. I have a client, an international keynote speaker. She's 5'2", 120 pounds. She has the same kind of presence on stage. So the first thing you do is you gotta own the physical real estate you stand in. You can't be all crutched and bent and trying to protect your solar plexus and feel all twisted and bent. And I get it. It can be intimidating. Remember, chronic stutterer here. I could not even speak before. So I get the complaint that this is not fair because this is a huge guy. Okay. It's just a matter of standing in your full, not puffing your chest up. It's the difference between showing up as your full self versus full of yourself. So come back here to this camera. This is where the learning happens. So throughout all this and these series, remember the difference between it's not puffing your chest up and trying to fake it till you make it and try to appear bigger than you are, which comes across as full of yourself. It's just a matter of showing up as your full self. And that's only what's asked of you in any situation. You cannot be more than you are, and being less than what you really are is a disservice to you and the audience.
But the point is, we went from a small insurance company to a bigger insurance company. And you know how many people would say the following? Boom. My brand elevated, the insurance company followed. And then eventually the brand gets bigger than you, where it's a standalone without you. That's the goal of where you want to be with your company, because that's where the valuation goes up. So then because of this, you write books, you #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's the highest ranked it's ever been with the book because the brand keeps getting bigger. So the book comes out a year and a half ago. It's selling more copies today than when it came out the first month. I don't know if you heard what I just said. The book is, you know how books typically come out? It sells the most in the first month. The book is selling more today, year and a half later, 2 years later than when the book came out 2 years ago. Why? The brand's gotten bigger. As the brand gets bigger, all the opportunities increase as well. So now,
there's so many things and there's so many layers just about the strategy and the business and what's going on underneath all that. But let's just take the speaking part, the easy part. The first one is timeline and anchoring. So if you notice in the beginning, he said we went from a small insurance company to a big insurance company. Now, Pat's a number guy. Everybody likes to look at graph. Think about money over time. How do you want your graph to look like? What kind of graph makes you feel good? How do you want to see your numbers presented that way? Now, the thing is, Pat's on stage. You're on stage. Think of it like yourself. You're on stage. Your timeline does not move that way. That's right to left. When you're looking at a graph in your mind, you want your graph to be that way. So if Pat would be thinking of himself on stage, he'd say, we went from a small insurance company to a big one, which would make sense to him because that would be his graph, okay? Because think about this. This is you. This is your graph, okay? So the audience sees that graph. That's small here, big over there. You're looking at it this way. So as a speaker, you flip your reference chart to put whatever bad stuff is in the bottom here and the good stuff is in the top there. This is NLP 101, very simple and basic. You know, like a classic NLP joke. I never say anything bad about my competitors. There's spatial anchoring for that. So all the time, the guy's speaking. I was in the park the other day, and I walked in doo-doo like dog. That smelled horrible. And I was telling my grandma about this, and she said, "Oh, such and such competitor was asking about this or whatever it was." See, they just talk about bad stuff and they anchor it there. So that's the classic joke. But anytime you have to speak about something that shows a progression, you cannot use your point of reference, use the audience's. And then watch this. He does it again later, but he messes it up and then he says it again in the right order. See what happens.
So the book comes out a year and a half ago. It's selling more copies today than when it came out the first month. I don't know if you heard what I just said. The book is, you know how books typically come out? It sells the most in the first month. The book is selling more today, a year and a half later, 2 years later than when the book came out 2 years ago.
For a split second there, he's thinking his frame of reference. So he's saying, so he's on that side of the stage. So the first part of the story was that side. Then he went, told the story, which we'll go over, anchoring it on the stage. Now he's out on that side of the stage, which is the good side. And on there, he's talking about, well, the book, something about selling more now than when it came out. In his frame, his timeline is going that way. He said selling more now than when it came out. And he said, hear what I just said? Comes back online, mimes it with his full body. You know how? Okay, you know how. Now, mind you, we're going this one by one right now, but the whole thing, it's all together. This guy's amazing. So he says, you know how books gets the nod, gets the approval, gets the yes from the crowd, okay? Well, now sells more. And he does it twice again because the brand got bigger, which was a reference to another anchor that he mimed previously in the beginning of the story, which we'll see later, which was the miming. And also, he's almost doing like the automation of a PowerPoint slide that you would do, but with his hands as he's telling the story. Beautiful.
My brand elevated, the insurance company followed. And then eventually the brand gets bigger than you, where it's a standalone without you. That's the goal of where you want to be with your company, because that's where the valuation goes up.
See what he did there? So you got this and then that, and then moves the whole body around, and now this becomes that, moves this, which is bigger than you. And then when he says the you, he anchors it and just moves it slightly. That's like you making a loon video or like a document for your team where you will just circle something important or highlight a passage or a word as you're miming it in the field. Now, this is being anchored. Later on, if you just play the rest of it,
it's the highest ranked it's ever been with the book because the brand keeps getting bigger.
And there's the anchor again. What was anchored on that side of the stage, as he's going through the motion, it's anchored. He's going to use it again towards the end of that little segment. Timelines and anchoring, miming the thing physically. When you're telling a story, if you're really there's a thing called associated and dissociated visualization. So somebody can say, yeah, I was doing a bike ride and it was a beautiful sunny day and they were pink lilies. This is somebody in their mind seeing themselves on a bicycle, versus somebody's like this on the bicycle, they're in it. Now, you don't need to overdo it. Like, it's easy to see like overtrained speakers and TED Talks. You see this all the time, okay? But the words he's interacting with are visceral, are real, are things, are tangible things he's touching and playing with and anchoring in space. And when he's moving with the same motions, he can call back these things he was referring to previously in the story. Now, he's not doing this consciously. What, like a master, this is in flow and natural. Now you can observe it. I'm sure, like if he would watch his own video, it would catch himself do it. But he's not thinking about this on the spot. This guy's on a mission, what we call greater than. Well, when I don't have a mission, I don't know what I stand for in life. Yes, you do. It's just a matter of finding what fires you up enough to get up in the morning. If there's nothing, use nothing. So what's fun about this is the same clip we can watch 3 times for 3 different things. We'll watch a clip we've seen before, but this time for the you know and the emphasis trick. A guy like PBD knows that first, it's his responsibility to make sure they get it. He's an expert communicator. So beginner communicators might say, well, I said it, so now they must understand. I said it once, they should get it. in the midst of the action, he says something. The book sells more than the actual whatever. It doesn't land as much. He feels it, maybe he sees it in the audience, takes a pause, emphasis, repeats the thing with a statement. You know how, and gets a nod from the audience, and see how he does that.
So the book comes out a year and a half ago. It's selling more copies today than when it came out the first month. I don't know if you heard what I just said. The book is, you know how books typically come out? It sells the most in the first month. The book is selling more today, a year and a half later, 2 years later than when the book came out.
I don't know if you heard what I just said. This poking at the audience. When you're on stage, forward movement on the audience is a thing. The way you move is a thing. All this is done subconsciously, but it's done masterfully. There's emphasis, pause, and the statement, all that together. So let's move on to another clip where we can see the smooth transitions, the chunking. By the way, chunking, I always lose my words and I forget what to say and I don't know when it's time to change my stories. It's too hard. I need to memorize. I need to have a script. Chunking. Here's the trick for chunking. Don't chunk for your satisfaction. By the way, what is chunking? Chunking is when you move from section to section, how things are button-ended. Where's your paragraph finish? Where does your chapter finish? You chunk based on the impact in the audience. You chunk based on the result of the audience. So come back to this camera. Remember, the goal of this camera is for you to come here. This is where you learn. And the goal of this camera is for you to kick butt, take names, get out there and multiply your income, impact, and influence. And the way you chunk your information is, okay, there's a goal in this section that I'm doing. I need to get this message across. If you keep that goal in mind, you monitor the angle at the depth at which it goes. Influence is measured in degrees of influence. Impact is measured in depth of impact. How deep did it land in the psyche of the audience? So when you chunk based on, mission accomplished, so move on. And you hear him say, so now you're gonna hear him say, I think it's here somewhere. It's just done, check, move on to the next thing. So that's chunking. Let's go see now one of his smooth transitions.
My brand elevated, the insurance company followed. And then eventually the brand gets bigger than you, where it's a standalone without you. That's the goal of where you want to be with your company, because that's where the valuation goes up. So then because of this, you write books, you #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's the highest ranked it's ever been with the book because the brand keeps getting.
Oh man, PBD, that was so smooth. My story, what happened in my YouTube channel, my brand, blah, blah, bigger than you. The you switch, okay? It's bigger than you, and then moves on to the stage to some other place, anchoring something else, and now you start writing. See, and so now, this says, because of this, the word because. There's so much more there's more than this here, but because now you have that brand, because when you're telling a story, people become the person in the story. They're going through the motions internally. So there's also a thing called external to internal switch, which in the next clip he's doing it, not in this one here. The IU switch was made in the hand, you. And then because of this, now you write bestsellers, man. This IU switch, use this all the time. You see a boring speaker? I was born in 1979 and my father told me that this, and then my auntie told me that I could never. I mean, 3 of those and you're out. The audience is tuning out. This is what he says there is, I was born in 78, and what I first figured out is my uncle told me, when you, bam, whatever the story you are telling needs to relate to the audience as fast as possible. Now, they could make the mental effort to put themselves in it, but why not just give it to them? So as soon as you can. Now, the goal with this is you want to tell your story in their eyes or their story through yours. You want them to see themselves in your story, and you do this with IU switches. A more advanced one is the external internal. This is when you go, I was driving along, everything was fine. Then I just stopped at a stop sign and I started thinking to myself, boom. The switch from the external world to the internal world is how you do the external internal switch. Simple as that.
He shows the statistic of parks in America Dramatic drop off by 70% shutting down.
He's showing a stat while giving an example in the story. He's later going to physically mime the people in the story. It's all there baked in. Timeline and anchors. He's going now to that side of the stage, talking about a stat where 70% down. You see what he's doing there? So, basic stuff if you know it, but if you don't know this and you're doing this all the opposite wrong with the improper gesticulation and not miming anything, and you just give a stat, people can't make sense of numbers. In the next clip, we'll show how he makes sense of numbers for people. Much like astrophysicists, that they talk in light years, people don't know what the speed of light is. They don't know what a light year is really. Like, they can't understand it. They can't wrap their mind around it. So you have to give them analogies and ways of thinking about it. Here, he's showing the stat, demonstrating it, and he's going to mime the story a bit later.
Dramatic drop off by 70% shutting down. He says, do you know why? Let me show you why. Then he shows lawyers go sit at parks all day waiting for a kid to drop off, hit their elbow, crack the elbow. Oh, is that your son? That's not fair. It's the city's fault. It's the city's fault. Come here, let me see that arm. Perfect. I will represent you. He's feeling good. Are you hurt as a mother? I will get you $1 million. You deserve $1 million for this, Mary. I will take care of you. They go to the city. They sue the city. Get $1 million. He keeps 33%, 330 grand. They get $660,000. Next park shuts down. Obese. So a lot of people become rich soon people. This is a weird world. I just don't want to make it like that, right?
Then he moves on to a different example. See? The miming of the story, the lawyer there, the lawyer closing, saying the yes which is, there's so much other stuff in there. Salesman technique, closing the lady there on selling them on why this is a benefit. The child, everything is okay. He's in the story. He's seeing Mary, the mother. He's seeing the children, and he's miming there, giving the example, giving the numbers so people get it, how big of a problem it is. That's all baked in as natural storytelling. This is just basic natural stuff that natural communicators do. Like, he's not thinking about his hands as he's doing this. This is why you see sometimes like robotic people, they learn body language tricks to say yes and then smile at the end of their words. That's not what this is going on. This is him embodying the message. And at that time, there's a thing called charismatic messaging where you repel the people you don't want as an audience and you attract the people you do want as an audience just by being who you are and telling your stories the way you tell them. This is what this is. His clients are entrepreneurs. His stated goal is to be a leader amongst leaders in the entrepreneurial world. So he's framing these people who make a living by suing people as not us. We are something else, which is a good thing, and I agree with. This is how he did it in that particular instance.
Invest. I want to invest in a business, let somebody else do the work, and I make the return on the money. Sue somebody. I like to sue people. Like, somebody will say, I want to sue. If I sue the right person, make a couple $1 million. There's a lot of people that become millionaires suing people. Anybody knows anybody that's made money suing people? There's a lot of people in America. Guys, I remember I went to a meeting one time. This guy's giving a talk. He says,
Stop. By the way, okay, when it continues, just to make sure, PPD is not saying he likes to sue people. He's given an example of how multiple ways to have wealth, example. Then he moves on to a story to give a point. Some people do that, and by the end of that skit, he's saying, I don't play like that. He's speaking to a crowd of entrepreneurs, which is, you don't take what other people have, you build something. So that's his true core, and that's the core of the audience in that place, just to make that clear. But you see how he transitioned that? He didn't say, oh, let me tell you a story. Is it okay if I share a little story? Oh, I have a great story to illustrate. See, by the time you are in a story, it's too late. You need to get in that thing quick. By the time they realize they're in a story, it's already too late. You don't ask for permission to go. See how he says it.
guys, I remember I went to a meeting one time.
Guys, I remember I went to a meeting one time. So he's moving place. This thing was done. This thing was chunked. The purpose of this thing was chunked. He's moving to another place, anchoring some of the place, and says, guys, I remember I was in a meeting one time. The first principle of a story is you got to tell where it is. You don't have to say, I was in a meeting one time, I had a blue suit, it was 1979. You can just go straight into it. Now he's going to go tell that story. Now there's so much other stuff going on that we're not mentioning here. There's so much, okay? But let's just take this. If you have a story to tell and you know in your chunking, in your points and making landing, you're selling something from the stage. Stories are what do the selling, okay? You need to go from one to the other, to the other, to the other, bam, you make a point. Well, you can't put the brakes on between everyone and ask permission to tell a story. If you haven't seen the video on the channel here, I made a video about how to perform inception from the stage using story selling secrets. It's on the channel. Just type in, inception from the stage or a Sly story selling something. You'll find it. It's on the channel. There's Leonardo DiCaprio and I on the thumbnail. That should help you. So, smooth transition. Go right into it. All right, before we wrap up, I'm going to show you a very important external-internal switch he has here. By the way, Pat, if you watch this, thank you so much. I appreciate your service in the military, your service for entrepreneurs, your service for the next generations with your kids, the way you're raising them. It's beautiful. Thank you for everything you're doing and everything you are. And thank you for sharing Dr. David Hawkins' message and books in the entrepreneurial world. I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. And if you happen to know PBD, you say, hey, Pat, you got to speak with Sly. I'd love if you could hook us up any way that you can. Thanks. So the last one here, this switch is on the Joe Rogan podcast. Check this out.
13% of our GDP, which is around $850 billion. That's more than the next 10 combined. We gave more money to Ukraine than Russia spent on their military last year. And when you look at these contracts, then you're like, okay, Fink is there. These guys are there. Okay, let's go look at Hollywood. Same thing you see there. Let's go look at pharmaceutical. Let's go look at this. And you're like, wait a minute. These guys essentially have a monopoly. Well, how big is BlackRock?
Whoa. What happened there? What happened there? There's so much going on in here. It's crazy. Okay? The miming, the body language, the eyes, we could go into, there's so much. This is beautiful. So for example, there's a big stat he just said before. He knows people can't wrap their head around this, so he kind of puts an example to it. We gave more than all this combined. That's beautiful. Now he's talking about, well, you check this, then you check this, then you look at this, you look at that, and he's pointing, you look at this, you look at that. These are embedded commands in there, by the way. And then he went and says, and then you think to yourself. So within the IU switch, which he came back and forth a few times, he started going into, now you ask yourself that, now you realize, as soon as you do the external to internal switch, and you start describing sensations, perceptions, decisions, intuitions, hunches you had in the story, you had in your life, or you read in a movie, but it's framed in a you language internally for the person. This is where they start to have what's called associated visualization. Remember when I talked about the guy who was describing like a scene on the bike, dissociated, blah, blah, versus the guy who's on the bike? Well, when you start telling your stories with the IU switch and then you move from external to internal, the audience starts to have an associated experience of the transformation you need them to have in order to do what you want them to, or feel like doing the thing you want them to by the end. So your conversions go up, your sales go up, your buy-in go up, and they become more cooperative all of a sudden. Hope you like this. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Sly with the Transformational Speaking Academy, helping you transform yourself and your message so you can transform others and your bank account. Godspeed.